This is a story that began 5 years ago, around the ever part of Happily Ever After, when my prince and I found our dream home. Alas, nothing can ever be that simple. Long story short, we spent 2.5 years rebuilding a house that maybe should have been torn down. I regret nothing, not least because I love this house, but also because it gave us the opportunity to build an attached studio from the ground up. We poured the foundation, framed and wired the walls with the help of friends and family, and I learned just how much caulk goes into finishing a room. It's a lot of caulk. We did finally finish the studio, and after 2.5 years of low-key trying to make it look like the kitchen from Practical Magic, we arrive at today. I think it is only fitting if we start in the area which is probably the most familiar to anyone who's seen my videos. This is my introduction space. Way back when I designed the space, I knew that I wanted a space where I could just kind of stare at the camera and chit-chat, introduce things, whatever. I didn't really know what that was going to look like yet because I was still in the early days of my channel. And if you have been on my channel for a while, you know that it has gone through a little bit of an evolution. Not really understanding much about how natural light worked at that point because I had always worked in an apartment, and so all of my sewing had been done, you know, in just corners of dining rooms and stuff, no natural light. And so I thought, oh, I'll put it next to the window because that's going to be where the best natural light is, right? Well, turns out that the sun changes positions throughout the day. Actually, it wasn't this wall that gets the best light throughout the day. It's actually this wall that gets the best, most consistent light throughout the day. And so I wanted to kind of have an introduction space that sort of like wrapped around these two walls. Back in those early videos, I have this white shelving unit behind me. I thought having a white bookcase that would just kind of like melt into the white wall and I could, you know, put books and stuff like that would kind of just make you not see it really, which kind of worked. It looks very, very sparse in the background of those first few videos. And rather than looking clean and crisp, it just kind of comes across cold, I think. So I thought that the background of my introduction shots was probably a really good place for me to sort of indicate the story of my channel, I suppose, my personal aesthetic, but also just, you know, a little bit about me, why not? And that kind of starts with the shelving unit that I chose. So this has this gorgeous warm wood, and I really personally love things that are a little bit unfinished, a little bit raw, borderline industrial looking, but I think that the color of this really helps it to still look nice and warm. I think I've also seen a couple of other YouTubers with this in their background, so maybe this is just a really good thing for YouTube. And plus it gives really good depth of field. I don't have a super huge space, so I'm able to kind of set the camera back and just having things in the background, you know, it looks nicer. It just adds some texture and it looks a lot warmer than just having a white bookcase. I'm very, very lucky to have a partner who is super handy, and so he was able to customize all of this for me. He put together 2 different units. I think he cut part of one off and then added this top piece here, which just makes this a really good height behind me in my videos. This is actually a mid-century plant pot, which I use kind of to house like any current pieces that I'm working with, any sewing tools that I'm currently working with. Scissors, pins, seam ripper, tape, first aid kit, you know, things that you need in a sewing room. This is actually a really nice little nook that my husband made to house specifically my patterns of fashion and cut my coat apparently, but patterns of fashion, which are, you know, kind of big and flat and difficult to actually store on a proper bookcase. So those have their own little slot, which is really useful. One thing that I realized when I got my own space and I was able to design storage is that you need places for pretty storage and ugly storage. So I have my shelves over here that have more or less like pretty storage, things that can be displayed, things that tell a story, whatever. And then I have my ugly storage over here, which also locks. So I don't have to worry about little people getting into it. And that's where I store like extra scissors, my X-Acto knives, things that I don't want kids getting into. Then you have the actual central bookcase, and here along the bottom I store all of my cabbage. Got it all organized by type. I have my historical cabbage, which is mostly natural fibers, currently is full of black wool and silk. Got like costumey cabbage from my kids and like felt and I don't know, just other stuff that I've worked on. Then I've got all of my sketchbooks. I've got my historical reference books, more historical reference books. I've got more or less modern sewing books, and then just some other, can't be without Shakespeare. And I've got some designer books as well. This is actually a really excellent book. This is the Lady Di Lookbook by Eloise Moran. Just a cool little book about Lady Diana and how she was able to express herself using her clothing, which I think is really cool. This is all of my drafting materials, so like pencils, small rulers, erasers, stuff like that. I use the top of the shelf kind of as my like display area, I guess. This is actually a wheel thing from a 1926 Singer sewing machine that one of my dear friends was kind enough to give me. Currently in the process, obviously early in the process of restoring it, looking for a new desk because the desk that went with it originally kind of was dissolving. And this is a milliner's block. I've got a couple of these. Very good if you are designing hats or anything. I've got all of these spools of cotton, and actually I have many, many more. These are from my undergraduate collection. I actually worked with a local organic cotton farmer. So I have a lot of really beautiful organic cotton yarn. Sorry, I've got all of these plants up here because I basically want to pretend that I live in Narnia, but they do not make this easier. I actually grew my own cotton plant a few years ago. I was only able to get one cotton boll off of it, and it's there. My ill-fated medieval tailor shears, my spyglass from the Our Flag Means Death project. I am so looking forward to the next season. I am shipping Blackbeard and Steed Bonnet to the moon. I cannot wait. My husband got me this because he said I used to look like Agra as I was on my way to design school. I think because I used to wear a lot of layers. Who knows? I love finding antique or vintage Shakespeare books, and so this is my very small collection of those, which are pretty dear to me. This is another ugly storage unit full of electronic things. So chargers, SD cards, random cords. You have more flat storage for those super awkward flat books. Just another quick thing, in case anyone out there is thinking about designing a space for sewing or filming or anything, about natural light and the way that light naturally works. I was so excited to have natural light. I love filming in natural light. I love working in natural light and just bathing myself in natural light. And so I was very preoccupied with where the light was going to come from in the room. I have these huge French doors, which are awesome, and in theory I was going to use them to, I don't know, go outside and garden while I was sewing. I have no idea. I have never once used this as an actual doorway. I do really love the floor-to-ceiling huge natural light point. This is an east-facing wall, and so this gets the early morning sunlight, which was not an accident. I definitely did that on purpose because I thought, ooh, early morning golden sunlight, that's gonna be beautiful. Early morning golden sunlight is very harsh and intense. It is not the easiest thing to work with. You kind of just want to like shade your eyes and wear sunglasses the entire time. And it's not the easiest thing to film with because it will actually like blow out anything that you're filming and make everything just very, very white. This thing is gonna let me shoot the ceiling. Oh, there you go, right up the nose. I also have these skylights up here, which again, that was supposed to be natural light coming into the room. They're open right now because it's a little bit later as I'm filming this, but they do not let in the best quality light. As you can see, like it's coming straight down from above, and so it's not the most flattering thing ever for a person. But you know, we're besties, so you can see me like this, it's fine. I say as I find the better light. So if I were to go back in time, or if I were to renovate this room, which I won't, but if I were to, I would probably move the storage room, which is on the south facing wall, to the north wall and put a window on the south wall, because I think that that would actually bring in a lot of beautiful diffused angled lighting, which I've learned is the best lighting. You don't want direct sunlight, you want diffused indirect light. A beautiful thing actually happens right around this time. This is the best time to film in the middle of the room, which is where I do all of my sewing, because the light actually bounces against that white wall right there and then back through the space, which makes the sewing space very lovely and golden and bright and just, you know, perfectly diffused. So I guess my takeaway from that small lighting rant was that if you are going to build a space, especially from the ground up, spend some time in the space. Maybe like cut a square out of some paper and just see what the light looks like when it's coming through from different directions at different times of the day. It's a big project, and so getting the lighting right is really crucial. I was lucky that it kind of worked out in the end for me, but you know, it's almost like an accident. Here is my lovely industrial machine. She is sitting right up against the window, so she gets beautiful natural light as I'm sewing, and I love her. She is so dependable and just so simple. She only does one stitch and she does it very, very well. However, she did just get an upgrade. She just got this brand new servo motor. Before, she had a clutch motor, which sounded like a lawnmower even when she wasn't going. If it was just turned on, it was super loud and it would shake the table. This could be on right now. It's not, but it could be. It's so quiet, and even if she's going, it just sounds like a gentle purr. This is actually a refugee from the living room. My kids will not leave it alone, so it's chilling in here for a little bit, but I think that it would probably love to be back in its home. This mysterious door right here actually goes to a back storage room, which is where I store all of my machines, all of my bigger sewing equipment. I have about 10 knitting machines right now, which is probably something that you all didn't know about me yet. You will soon though. And all of that is stored back there, as is all of my fabric and all of my archival fashion. We won't go in there. This is another really big thing that I did for the sake of filming. I actually put in these gorgeous acacia hardwoods into this room, and they cause a lot of reverb. So I put down this wool carpet, which sounds a lot better, but it makes itself known in other ways as well. It actually ends up on just about every piece of textile that enters this room is just covered in like these wool pieces, including anything black that I do. So, you know, you give, you take. This wall is also something which has gone through a little bit of an evolution. Because I'd always worked in an apartment and I was always like working with weird textures on walls and stuff, I knew that I just wanted a nice clean white wall where I could take very neutral photos of like toiles or drapes or design ideas or whatever. But again, in a video that ends up looking very bland and sparse. So we actually put up this curtain, just like these little hook things, and then this like long plastic thing that we spray painted brass. So nothing fancy, but this does just provide like a little bit of visual interest behind any shots that happen to happen against this wall. Just a little bit of background texture, which is always nice. We have my big tripod, which just kind of unfortunately lives here on the ground because he's so tall, but he's really good for getting like above shots from the sewing table. This is my ironing setup, which is pretty basic, honestly. Iron set a couple inches away from the back so that you can, you know, push fabric over. I did recently upgrade to a gravity-fed iron, which has been a huge help. I then immediately broke it, which was not a huge help, but it actually makes what can be a pretty tedious task just a little bit easier because the ironing itself is more efficient, but also because it has this handy water bottle up top, you don't have to fill it up as often, so that is really nice. I've got all of my pressing tools as well as my starch, my bottle of water and vinegar, lint roller, my children's toys that I use as clappers. This is my iron cord, which is hooked up to this timer. And this you can just get on like Amazon or wherever. But in order to plug in my iron, I have to plug in this thing and then I turn on this button. And that way my iron can only ever be on for 30 minutes. So if you walk away and forget your iron, it will turn off automatically, which really is helpful because I am that person who then will run back into the house 40 times thinking that I forgot my iron. This was supposed to be a tri-fold mirror. I had a tri-fold mirror in New York and I loved it, but then I don't know. This is the door right here, and that's obviously a mirror. I was gonna put another mirror right here, and the idea was that you could then close the door and you would have a tri-fold mirror so you can see yourself in 360, fit your 12s better, whatever. But then I would have had to have given up an entire wall basically for this thing, and that just wasn't gonna happen. So now it is essentially a useless mirror and the mirror that I actually use. And that brings us to the heart of the room, which is the work table. This is what I use whenever I want to get those closer shots of, you know, sewing, hand sewing, whatever. I've got the much taller tripod, which is really good at shooting down and getting like the entire table from up above. But this is really good for those like more detail shots. So this is my current project. I'm currently attaching a lining to a coat. This is where all the magic happens. I'm so sorry. I immediately regretted saying that as soon as it came out. So this is my little more aesthetic like pin situation. Some nice pin ASMR, which never happens in my house. So I took tailoring in design school, which was like years ago. I also worked at a tailor shop, which was years ago. So this is helping me kind of bridge those gaps that I have in my knowledge as I embark on a tailoring project. And this is some wonderful primary research, super exciting stuff there. That is my hand sewing pillow. So it's just much easier to sew if you have one end of what you're sewing attached to something, gives you better tension. So I sew with that pillow. This is my Cameo silhouette machine, which is essentially like a CNC cutting machine. I use this for a lot of my kids' crafts and cards and stuff like that. But I have recently thought of a few different ways that I can actually kind of incorporate this into my channel's content without disrupting some of the original practice too much. So maybe soon. So the one thing that I will kind of leave you all with is this little tip. All of the big items in my sewing room, including the work table and my sewing machine, are all on casters, which means that I can move them around wherever I need. So when the light is better here, I can be sewing here. When the light is better maybe over here, which happens earlier in the morning, then I can sew over here. I can move this so that I can shoot a reveal or whatever. I can move it closer to the wall to shoot my intro. And I can also move the sewing machine because, you know, occasionally I shoot like the reveal against this wall or whatever, and nobody wants to see a sewing machine in the reveal shot. So yeah, that's my final thing is, yeah, casters are good. So that's it, that's the space. My gimbal is doing something very odd, but thank you so much for joining me on this workroom tour. I really have enjoyed building this space, and it has come to mean a lot to me. And I think that that's something really important in modern sewing, is that you enjoy your space, whatever space it is. So if you have enjoyed this video, I always appreciate a thumbs up. And if you would like to stick around and watch as my latest project trickles out, I promise that as soon as SAG comes to an agreement, I will hit the upload button. So watch out for that. In the meantime, bye.